All right. Let's dive into something that I think is pretty relevant for, well, for all of us these days. Securing your Windows setup. You sent over this piece from Anytime Computer Service written by Eddie Boscana, and I gotta say, the timing it couldn't be better. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a hot topic, and for good reason, I think. Windows being, the most popular operating system out there, it's a big target.
Yeah, makes sense. More users, more vulnerabilities, I guess.
Right, right. More opportunities, let's say, for those looking to exploit, any weaknesses they can find.
So before we even get into like the nitty-gritty of, software and firewalls and all that, what kind of threats are we even talking about here? Like how are Windows users actually being targeted these days?
Well, you've got your usual suspects, right? Malware and ransomware always kind of lurking around, looking for a way to sneak in and cause havoc.
Right, right.
And then there are those phishing attacks, which, they're getting more sophisticated all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But what's particularly concerning, I think, is this rise in physical attacks
Yeah.
using things like, rubber ducky USB devices,
Uh-huh.
OMG cables, even something called a flipper. Have you heard of these?
Physical attacks. That sounds a little too close to comfort. How does that even work?
It's surprisingly simple, actually. These devices are designed to look, totally inconspicuous, like a regular USB drive or a cable. But inside, they've got these malicious scripts that can be injected into your system the moment you plug them in.
Yeah.
So imagine like someone drops a seemingly harmless USB stick, right, in a public place. You find it and think, oh, free storage.
Right, right. Score.
Yeah, and then you plug it right into your computer. And that's it. That's all it takes.
That's both ingenious and terrifying at the same time. I mean, it's a good reminder, I guess, that understanding these threats is really the first step to protecting yourself. I mean, you can't fight what you don't know, right?
Right. Exactly. You got it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a fundamental security principle that can help you kind of stay ahead of all this. Zero trust.
Zero trust. Okay, yeah, I've heard that term thrown around, I'll admit. But it always sounded a little bit intimidating to me.
Yeah. It might sound kind of intense, but it's really just common sense when you get down to it.
Okay.
Think of it this way. You wouldn't just, open your front door to anyone who knocks without checking who it is, right?
No, of course not.
Exactly. Zero trust is like that, but for your digital life,
Yeah.
it means never assuming anything is safe just by default. You always verify before granting access.
Correct.
Don't automatically trust anything, whether it's inside or outside your network.
Okay, that actually makes a lot more sense now that you put it that way. So how do you actually put zero trust into practice though? Like on a Windows computer specifically, what are the building blocks?
Well, it really boils down to a few key things: network segmentation, multi-factor authentication, and privilege management. Let's take them one by one. So network segmentation, what is that?
It's all about dividing your network into smaller, more secure compartments.
Oh, okay. So instead of giving everyone access to the entire network, you're creating these separate, like, isolated zones?
Precisely. You're essentially creating a trust boundary. Think about it. Think about like the different rooms in your house, right?
Okay.
Each room has a specific purpose, and you wouldn't necessarily give someone access to your entire home just because they need to use the bathroom,
Right.
right?
Right. Makes sense. So how do you actually implement that on a network though?
So there are a few practical techniques. You can use something called VLANs, virtual local area networks, to separate devices and control the traffic between them.
VLANs.
Yeah, it's like having like virtual walls within your network.
Oh, okay.
And then you have ACLs or access control lists, they're like the bouncers at the door of each room. They make sure only authorized devices or users can enter. Okay, so you've got your virtual walls and your bouncers. What about things like web servers or other, publicly accessible services? Those have to be accessible from outside your network though, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's where the DMZ comes in.
The DMZ.
Yeah, the DMZ. It stands for Demilitarized Zone. It's basically a separate, isolated segment of your network that sits between the internet and your internal network.
Okay.
Anything publicly accessible that lives in the DMZ. So even if it gets compromised, it's much harder for attackers to then move laterally and gain access to more sensitive areas of your network.
Oh, that's smart. Okay, so that's network segmentation in a nutshell. What about multi-factor authentication? I feel like I hear that term everywhere these days.
And for a good reason. MFA it's like your digital bodyguard. It's like having two locks on your door instead of just one. Even if someone gets their hands on your key, which in this case is your password, they still need something else to actually get in.
Right, like needing a password and from a fingerprint scan to unlock your phone. So what are the different types of authentication factors?
Usually it involves something like a password, something you have, like your phone or a physical token, and sometimes even something you are, which is where biometrics like fingerprints come in.
Okay.
The idea is to combine at least two of these factors.
Right. So even if someone steals your password, they still can't get in without that second piece of the puzzle. That makes a lot of sense. All right, what about that last one you mentioned? Privilege management. What's that all about?
Right. So privilege management, think of it like this. It's kind of like setting the ground rules,
Mm-hmm.
within your system.
Okay.
It's about making sure that users and programs only have access to the information and resources that they absolutely need to do their job, nothing more.
So like giving someone a key to the house, but it only unlocks like one specific door, not the entire place.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, you got it. It's all about, minimizing the potential damage if a user account or program gets compromised. And the guiding principle here is something called the principle of least privilege.
The principle of least privilege.
Yeah, or POLOP.
POLP, I like it. Easy to remember.
Right. And it's incredibly effective. You also want to look into something called role-based access control, or RBAC.
RBAC.
Yeah, it's a way of managing permissions based on a user's role within an organization.
Hmm.
So instead of granting access individually, you assign permissions to specific roles.
Oh, okay. So the intern doesn't accidentally get access to like sensitive financial data or anything.
Exactly. And there's some really great tools out there that can help you manage all of this.
Yeah.
ThreatLocker, for instance. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
They offer some really interesting features for application control and what they call ring fencing, which really fit perfectly with this whole zero trust approach. But we can maybe dive into that a little bit later.
Okay, so we've laid down like a solid foundation with zero trust, right? Now let's talk about those built-in Windows security features, because I have to admit I often wonder if people even know like what's already available to them without having to install a bunch of, third-party software.
You're absolutely right. Windows has come a long way in terms of security. For most users, the built-in features are a great starting point. Let's start with the Windows Defender firewall.
Okay.
Think of it as your computer's own personal bodyguard, checking IDs at the door, making sure nothing suspicious gets in.
So it controls what's allowed to come in and out of my computer network.
Precisely. And one of the most important things you can do with it is enable something called default blocking. So instead of allowing everything through by default and then blocking specific things, you flip the script.
Oh, interesting. So you're basically saying nobody gets in unless I specifically say so.
Exactly. It's a much more proactive approach to security.
Mm.
Of course, you'll need to define specific rules to allow legitimate traffic through, but it's well worth the effort.
That makes sense, yeah. What about Windows Defender antivirus?
Oh, yeah.
I know people they have a lot of strong opinions about antivirus software.
They do.
What's your take on that?
Well, Windows Defender has really, I think, stepped up its game in recent years. For the average user, it offers a surprising level of protection these days.
Really? Okay. So what are the key like settings that we should be looking at with Windows Defender antivirus?
First and foremost, make sure real-time protection is turned on. This means Windows is constantly scanning for and neutralizing threats in the background. You also want to enable something called controlled folder access.
Controlled folder access. What's that? What does that do?
So it adds an extra layer of security by restricting which programs can access your important files and folders.
Okay.
Think of it like a digital safe for your data. So if malware tries to encrypt your documents or something, controlled folder access can help prevent that.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's definitely something I'm gonna look into. Now let's talk about BitLocker drive encryption. Encryption always sounds so, I don't know, so serious and technical to me.
It is, but it's also one of the most effective ways to protect your data. Essentially, encryption scrambles your data into an unreadable format. So even if someone gets their hands on your computer or your hard drive, they can't make sense of your information without the decryption key.
So it's like having all your files locked in a vault that only you have the combination to.
That's a great analogy. And the great thing about BitLocker is that it encrypts your entire drive, not just individual files.
Oh, wow. Now, you mentioned something earlier. You called it a TPM.
Yes.
How does that tie into BitLocker?
Yes. TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module, and it's a dedicated chip on your motherboard that securely stores your encryption keys.
Okay.
Think of it like a super secure lockbox, right, for the combination to your vault.
Oh, okay. So it adds like an extra layer of like physical security to the encryption.
Exactly. It makes it significantly harder for attackers to bypass the encryption, even if they have physical access to your device.
Okay. This is a lot to process, but I'm starting to see how all these pieces kind of fit together. We've got our zero trust framework, and now we're building up our defenses with these built-in Windows features. What's next? So we've got zero trust, we've got these built-in Windows defenses. It's like we're building a digital fortress here. But I have a feeling there's more to this security story, isn't there?
You're right. There's always more. Remember those physical attacks we discussed earlier with things like those rubber ducky devices?
Where could I forget those sneaky little gadgets still give me chills.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. But here's the good news. There are some simple but very effective ways to protect yourself from that kind of thing.
Okay, like what?
Firstly, restrict USB access wherever possible, actually.
You mean like physically disable USB ports? Isn't that a bit extreme?
It might sound that way, but it's actually incredibly effective in preventing those types of attacks. Yeah, you can often disable USB ports entirely in your computer's BIOS settings. It's usually a quick change, and it completely eliminates the risk of someone plugging in a malicious device.
Okay, I'm listening. But what if I actually need to use a USB drive every now and then for, legitimate reasons?
Right, of course. And that's where device whitelisting comes in handy.
Whitelist. So like a guest list for my computer.
Precisely. You create a list of approved devices that are allowed to connect. Anything that's not on the list simply won't work.
That's really clever, actually. And I bet ThreatLocker can probably lend a hand with this too, huh?
You bet. They have a great device control feature that streamlines this whole process.
Very cool. All right, so we're locking things down left and right here, but how do I even know if someone's trying to, breach my defenses? What should I be looking out for?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
That's where monitoring and logging become, absolutely crucial. Think of it like having like security cameras and motion detectors, but for your computer.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that translate to the digital world?
Windows actually has this built-in tool called Event Viewer.
Event Viewer.
Yeah, and it logs pretty much everything that happens on your system.
Event Viewer. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating for the average user.
It can be, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. You can think of it like your computer's diary, basically.
Okay. So how do I even begin to like make sense of all that information? I mean, it must be like trying to read hieroglyphics.
Well, that's where knowing what to look for, it really comes in handy. There are specific event IDs and log entries that can indicate, suspicious activity. And if you're managing a larger network, you might want to even consider a SIEM system.
A SIEM system. More acronyms. You're really putting my tech vocabulary to the test here.
Sorry about that. SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. It's basically a centralized system for collecting and analyzing logs from all your devices and applications.
Okay.
Think of tools like Splunk or Graylog.
So instead of me like hunkering down and trying to like decipher these cryptic log files myself, a SIEM system does like all the heavy lifting.
Exactly. It's like having a dedicated security team monitoring your network 24/7, looking for any signs of trouble.
Oh, okay. That's reassuring. We've covered so much ground here, from software to hardware, everything in between. But let's be realistic for a moment. No system is completely foolproof, right? What if despite our best efforts, something slips through the cracks?
You're absolutely right, and that's why there's one more critical piece to this whole puzzle: backups.
Backups, the digital equivalent of flossing. We all know we should be doing it more often, right?
You got it. But think of backups as your insurance policy for your data. You hope you never have to use them, but if disaster strikes, you'll be eternally grateful that you took the time.
You're preaching to the choir here. I get it. Backups are important, but what's what's the best approach? Is there a right way to do it?
There's a strategy that a lot of people recommend. It's called the 3-2-1 rule.
The 3-2-1 rule. Okay, lay it on me.
Right. It's pretty simple. 3 copies of your data, which is your original, plus 2 backups, 2 different storage types, for example, your computer's hard drive and an external drive. And then 1 offsite backup, meaning you're storing a copy of your data in a separate physical location, just in case of, something like a fire or a flood or other, localized disaster.
So multiple backups, multiple storage locations, and 1 offsite, just to be like extra safe.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Any recommendations for good backup solutions out there?
Sure. Windows actually has a built-in backup and restore feature.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah. It's decent for basic needs, I would say. But for more robust protection, especially for businesses or anyone with a lot of critical data, you might want to consider a dedicated backup solution.
Yeah.
Or even cloud-based storage is becoming increasingly popular for that.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. I feel like I've learned a ton. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap things up?
Well, just remember, security is a journey, not a destination. There's no single solution that will magically make you invincible. But by adopting this kind of layered approach, combining those built-in Windows features, embracing the principles of zero trust, and staying vigilant with patching, monitoring, and backups, you'll be well on your way to a safer and more secure digital life.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a real eye opener for me, I gotta say. And we've only just scratched the surface of Windows security here, I think. But the key takeaway for me is that we can't be passive, right? We have to be proactive. We have to be informed, and maybe even a little bit cautious.
I completely agree. Knowledge is power, and the more you understand the threats and your options, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
Well said. Well, hey, thanks again for guiding us through this deep dive. This was great. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there, keep those systems updated, and remember, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask.